The lake was 42 degrees. Ethan Cole's lungs screamed as he dove, through water black with jet fuel, the cold stabbing into his skin like 1,000 frozen needles. His fingers found the shattered cockpit, window, glass scraping against his knuckles as he reached inside. A woman floated there, unconscious, her seatbelt jammed against the crushed frame. He didn't know her name. He didn't know she was worth $4 billion. He didn't know her company had killed his wife 6 years ago. All he knew was he had 90 seconds before they both drowned. On the dock above, his 9-year-old son Noah screamed into the morning fog, watching his father disappear beneath the sinking wreckage of a plane that should never have fallen from the sky. 10 minutes earlier, the world had been perfect. The spring sun hung high over Clearwater Valley, casting ribbons of gold across the mirror surface of the lake. Ethan sat in his weathered wooden boat, fishing, line trailing into water so clear he could see the rocky bottom 15 feet down. Pine trees framed the valley like cathedral walls, their branches swaying gently in the morning breeze. Birds called to each other across the stillness. The world felt small and safe, exactly the way Ethan needed it to be. On the dock, Noah lay on his stomach, flipping through a worn book about airplanes. The boy's obsession with flight had always struck Ethan as a cruel irony, a reminder of everything he had lost and everything he had tried to forget, but he never said anything. He just watched his son trace the outlines of wings and engines with his small fingers, dreaming of the sky. Then the sky tore open with a mechanical shriek. Ethan's head snapped upward. A private jet tilted at a sickening angle, against the blue, black smoke pouring from its right engine like blood. From a wound, the aircraft was losing altitude fast, its nose dipping toward the water in a trajectory that left no room for hope. The impact came 200 yards from Ethan's boat. The jet hit the lake with a sound like thunder, sending a column of white water 50 feet into the air. The shockwave rippled across the surface, rocking Ethan's small vessel violently. He didn't think. He didn't calculate the odds, or consider the temperature, or worry about what waited beneath the churning water. He simply dropped his fishing rod and dove. The cold hit him like a concrete wall. His chest seized, his muscles screaming in protest as the 42-degree water wrapped around him, like a shroud. Visibility was nearly zero, the water thick with jet fuel and debris. He could taste the chemical burn on his lips, feel it, stinging his eyes as he swam toward the sinking shadow of the aircraft. The cockpit was already 3 feet under when he reached it. Through the cracked windshield, he could see movement, a flash of pale skin, dark hair floating like seaweed. He grabbed the edge of the broken window, pulled himself closer, ignoring the glass that sliced into his palms. The woman was strapped into the passenger seat behind the pilot's position. The pilot himself was slumped forward, his head at an unnatural angle against the instrument panel. Ethan knew immediately. There was nothing to be done for him, but the woman was still breathing, shallow gasps that sent small bubbles rising toward the surface. Her seatbelt was jammed. Ethan pulled at the release mechanism, his fingers numb and clumsy in the freezing water. The plane was sinking, faster now, the cockpit filling with dark water that crept up the teeth, woman's chest, her neck, her chin. He yanked harder, felt something give, and suddenly she was free. He wrapped his arm around her chest and kicked toward the light above. His lungs burned, his muscles cramped. The surface seemed impossibly far away, a shimmering ceiling that retreated with every stroke. But he kept kicking, kept pulling, kept fighting against the cold and the dark, the weight of the woman in his arms. They broke the surface together. Ethan gasped, drawing air into his burning lungs as he pulled the woman's head above water. She coughed, once, violently, then drew a ragged breath of her own. Her eyes, fluttered open, unfocused and confused, before closing again. Noah had already brought the boat closer, his small hands steady on the processed oars. Despite the terror in his eyes, Ethan swam to the side and lifted the woman over the gunwale, laying her across the bottom of the boat, before hauling himself in after her. He checked her breathing, her pulse, found both weak but present. The woman's eyes opened again. This time, they focused on his face. Hair, lips moved, forming words that came out as barely more than a whisper. "Where's Michael?" Ethan understood. "The pilot." He shook his head slowly, watching her face crumble as the reality settled in. In the distance, the sound of helicopters grew louder. Someone had seen the crash. Help was coming. Ethan stood, his clothes dripping, his body shaking with cold. He looked at his son, at the fear and pride warring in the boy's young face. "Let's go home, bud." They left the woman on the shore for the rescue teams to find. No names exchanged. No numbers given, just a man who had done what needed to be done, then disappeared back into the trees like a ghost. The next morning, Ethan stood in his small kitchen, brewing coffee in a dented percolator that had belonged to his father. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains his late wife had hung 6 years ago, casting pale patterns across the worn wooden floor. The cabin smelled like pine and old paper, the familiar sense of a life deliberately simplified. In the corner, a small television played the morning news. The anchor's voice was urgent, excited, the way it always got when tragedy transformed into spectacle. Billionaire CEO survives jet crash in remote California lake. Vivian Hale, head of Hale Dynamics, was pulled from the wreckage by an unknown rescuer who disappeared before emergency services arrived. The screen showed aerial footage of the crash site. Helicopters circling, divers in the water. The tail of the sunken jet visible just beneath the surface. Ethan turned off the television before the reporter could say anything more. He didn't need to know the woman's name. He didn't want to know her story. Heroes, in his experience, didn't get happy endings. They got complications. He poured his coffee and looked out the window at the lake. The water was calm again, smooth as glass, as if yesterday had never happened, as if the jet hadn't carved a scar across the sky and plunged into the depths just 200 yards from where his son had been reading about airplanes. 6 years ago, Ethan Cole had been someone else entirely, a senior aerospace engineer at Hale Dynamics, working on experimental aircraft, systems so advanced they barely had names. He had loved the work, the precision of it, the way metal and math and motion came together to defy gravity. He had been good at it too, good enough to see things others missed. That was the problem. He had discovered a flaw in the hydraulic control system, a weakness that caused catastrophic failure under specific stress conditions. He had written reports, sent emails, flagged it in meetings with increasing urgency. His supervisor had smiled and told him not to worry. The higher-ups would handle it. They didn't. 3 months later, during a test flight over the Nevada desert, the system failed exactly as Ethan had predicted. The aircraft exploded, mid-air, a fireball against the blue sky that was visible for miles. The pilot survived, ejecting just seconds before the blast. But Ethan's wife, Rebecca, did not. She had been visiting the observation tower that day with other families, a routine outing organized by the company to build morale and foster community. She had been standing at the west wall, holding 3-year-old Noah's hand, pointing up at the sky as the experimental aircraft traced patterns against the clouds. The shockwave from the explosion shattered the tower's west wall. Glass and concrete and twisted metal rained down on the families gathered. There, Rebecca had thrown herself over Noah, protecting him with her body as the world collapsed around them. Noah survived without a scratch. Rebecca died before the ambulances arrived. Ethan quit the next day. No severance, no apology, just a non-disclosure agreement and a polite suggestion that he move on with his life. The company called it a tragic accident, an unforeseeable catastrophic failure. They paid for the funeral, they sent flowers, they never admitted fault. So Ethan had taken his son and driven north until the roads turned to gravel and the gravel turned to dirt. He had bought this cabin with the last of their savings. A place with no internet, no cell service unless you climb to the ridge. Just a wood stove, a dock, and a view of the lake that stretched for miles. He fixed engines for the locals now. Small motors, lawnmowers, chainsaws, the occasional truck that wheezed up the mountain road. He taught Noah how to fish, how to read the weather by the color of the sky, how to be kind even when the world wasn't. At night, after Noah fell asleep, he read old engineering textbooks by lantern light, not because he missed the work, but because he couldn't forget it. The equations, the stress calculations, the warnings he had written that no one had read. His neighbor Carl, an older man who ran the general store in town, had asked him once why someone with his skills was living like a hermit in the mountains. Ethan had only smiled and said he liked the quiet. The truth was too heavy to share. The truth was that he had done everything right and lost everything anyway. The truth was that the company that had killed his wife was still flying planes with systems he knew were flawed, and there was nothing he could do about it. He didn't know that the woman he had pulled from the lake was hunting for the person responsible for nearly killing her. He didn't know that her survival had set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. The sound of engines rumbled up the dirt road just after 10 o'clock. The next morning, Ethan was outside splitting firewood on the chopping block, his flannel sleeves rolled up despite the spring chill. The rhythm of the axe was meditative, each swing a small release of the, quote, tension that had lived in his shoulders since the crash. Noah was inside working on a model airplane at the kitchen table, glue and balsa wood scattered across the surface. The boy had been quiet since yesterday, processing what he had seen in the way children do, through silence and small tasks and the occasional searching look at his father. The rumble grew louder, deeper, the kind of sound that didn't belong in a place like this. Ethan set the axe down and wiped his hands on his jeans, his pulse quickening despite himself. 3 black Cadillac Escalades emerged from the tree line. Their polished hoods gleamed in the sunlight like the shells of exotic beetles, utterly foreign against the backdrop of pine and dirt. Dust rose in slow clouds behind them, drifting through the shafts of light that cut between the trees. The lead car stopped 10 feet from the porch. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was tall, early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a sharp ponytail. She wore a charcoal blazer and slacks that probably cost more than Ethan's truck, the kind of clothes that announced wealth and power, without saying a word. A faint bruise marked her left temple, and there was a bandage on her jaw, white against her pale skin, but her eyes were steady, confident, the eyes of someone who was used to being in control. Vivian Hale walked forward, her heels crunching on the gravel with each step. Behind her, 2 assistants emerged from the other cars, both men, in dark suits, carrying leather folders and tablets. One of them held a thick envelope, the kind that held checks with too many zeros. Vivian stopped a few feet away and extended her hand. Her grip was firm, professional, the kind of handshake that closed deals and ended arguments. "You saved my life," she said, her voice clear and direct. "Then you disappeared before I could even thank you. I wanted to do that in person." Ethan withdrew his hand slowly, his expression unreadable. "No need. I did what anyone would have done. Vivian's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile. Not anyone, most. People would have filmed it and posted it online before calling for help. Her assistant stepped forward, offering the envelope with both hands, like it was something sacred. "We'd like to offer compensation for your bravery, Mr. Cole, and we'll need you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Standard procedure for incidents involving the company." Ethan didn't take it. He looked past her at the lake, glittering through the trees, then back at her face. His voice was quiet but firm. "I don't want money, and I don't sign things anymore." Vivian tilted her head slightly, studying him the way someone might study a puzzle with a missing piece. There was something in his tone, something old and bitter and carefully controlled. Her gaze drifted past him toward the open cabin door. She could see, inside, the simple furniture, handmade and sturdy, the stack of firewood. Beside the stove, the framed photo on the wall of a woman holding a baby, both of them smiling, and next to it, pinned with thumbtacks to a corkboard, a series of technical drawings, blueprints, schematics, clean lines, precise measurements, professional notations in neat handwriting. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the corner of the nearest drawing. The logo was unmistakable. Hale Dynamics. Her breath caught. Her gaze flicked back to Ethan. His face was unreadable now. A mask of calm that didn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Noah appeared in the doorway, curious, clutching his model plane in one hand. "Dad." "Who are they?" Ethan's expression softened immediately. "Just people passing through. Bud, go back inside." Noah nodded and disappeared into the cabin. Vivian looked at the empty doorway, then back at Ethan. Something shifted in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. She nodded slowly, as if something had clicked into place. "Thank you. Again, Mr. Cole. If you ever need anything, you know how to reach me." She used his name for the first time. She had done her research. She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked back to the car, her heels silent now on the soft earth. The Cadillacs reversed down the narrow road, engines purring, disappearing into the trees as smoothly as they had arrived. Noah stepped back onto the porch. "Dad, why'd she come all the way out here just to say thank you?" Ethan watched the dust settle. "She's from a different world, Noah. Not ours." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't that simple. Not anymore. By late afternoon, the story had spread across the valley and beyond. Not the quiet version where a man saved a life and went home. The twisted one, the one that sold. Someone had leaked a video of the crash. A blurry phone recording from a hiker on the ridge who had been filming the landscape when the jet went down. It showed the impact, the plume of water, and a small figure swimming toward the wreckage. Within hours, the footage had been shared thousands of times. News outlets picked it up. Bloggers analyzed it, frame by frame. And then the headlines began to multiply, each one worse than the last. Hero or setup? Questions surround mysterious CEO rescue. Billionaire's crash. Was she lured to remote lake? The articles speculated wildly. A man living alone in the woods with no job, no history anyone could find. A woman worth billions who just happened to crash practically on top of his property. The coincidences were too convenient, the commenters said. There had to be more to the story. The valley, which had been Ethan's sanctuary for 6 years, became a dock trap almost overnight. Reporters arrived by midday, renting rooms at the inn in town, parking their vans along the main road, knocking on doors and asking neighbors for quotes. Carl's general store became ground zero. Cameras set up outside. journalists buying coffee and asking everyone who walked in if they knew Ethan Cole. Carl called from the store around 2 in the afternoon, his voice apologetic and strained. "Ethan, I'm real sorry about this. They're saying things, bad things. People are starting to believe it." Ethan thanked him and hung up without saying much else. At the garage where he worked part-time, his boss Ray pulled him aside. Near the end of the day, Ray was a good man, the kind who had given Ethan a chance when no one else would. But his face was apologetic now and firm. "Look, Ethan, I don't believe what they're saying, but people are talking. My customers are uncomfortable. I think it's better if you take some time off, just until this blows over." Ethan didn't argue. He packed his toolbox in silence, hands steady, jaw tight, and walked out to his truck. At the grocery store that evening, picking up bread and milk for Noah, he felt the stares. Whispers followed him down the aisles like shadows. A woman with a shopping cart stepped back as he passed, pulling her young daughter closer, as if he were dangerous. Near the register, a man in a work jacket muttered to his friend, loud, enough to be heard. Probably planned the whole thing. You don't just happen to be there when a billionaire crashes. Ethan set his groceries down on the counter and walked out without buying anything. That night, rain hammered the cabin roof, a steady drumming that filled the silence. Noah sat at the kitchen table, picking at his dinner. Boy's eyes were red. "Dad, why are people saying you're bad?" Ethan looked at his son across the table, the boy who had lost his mother before he was old enough to remember her face clearly. The boy who had never asked for any of this. He wanted to explain that the world didn't care about truth when a lie was more interesting, that people believed what they wanted to believe, because it was easier than thinking. But he didn't say any of that. He just reached across the table and squeezed Noah's hand. Sometimes people get scared of things they don't understand. "It'll pass." Noah looked down at his plate. "Will it?" Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't promise something he didn't believe himself. He stood, cleared the plates, and turned off the kitchen light. In the darkness, he could hear the rain and the boys breathing and the distant hum of the world turning against him. Miles away, in her office at Hale Dynamics, Vivian sat at her desk, staring at a computer screen. The radar logs from her flight were open, lines of data scrolling across the display. There was a gap in the signal, a deliberate cut in the transmission. Someone had tried to kill her. The Hale Dynamics tower rose 40 stories above Seattle's skyline, glass and steel, reflecting the gray clouds that hung over the city like a shroud. Vivian's office occupied the top floor, a space of clean lines and minimalist furniture, leather chairs, a desk made of reclaimed wood, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Puget Sound, the water, dark and restless under the overcast sky. But tonight, the office felt like a cage. Vivian sat alone, the city lights glowing faintly beyond the windows. Her computer hummed softly as she opened the employee database, hesitating for just a moment before typing a name into the search bar. Ethan Cole. The file loaded slowly, then the words appeared. Employment terminated following incident review. Ineligible for rehire. She clicked deeper. A personnel report from 6 years ago, a technical memo. A series of emails. She read them in silence, her face growing pale. Ethan had warned them. Not once, not twice, 7 separate communications about a critical flaw in the hydraulic control system. He had flagged it as high priority, sent it up the chain to his supervisor, then to the engineering director, then to the VP of operations. Each time, he had received the same response. "We'll look into it. It's under review," but they hadn't. They had done nothing. 3 months later came the test flight over Nevada. The explosion. 1 fatality listed in the official report. Civilian observer. Name redacted. For privacy. Vivian opened the attached incident file. The name was there, buried in the details. Rebecca Cole, wife of Ethan Cole, survived by husband and one minor child. Vivian's hands trembled. She sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. The man who had saved her life had lost his wife because her company had chosen profit over safety. Because someone had decided that a $2.3 billion recall was too expensive. Because the warnings of one engineer didn't matter as much as the quarterly report. A knock at the door made her jump. She closed the file quickly. Her uncle, Grant Hale, stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. He was 62, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit. He had been with the company for 30 years, longer than Vivian had been alive. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Working late again, Vivian?" She forced herself to smile back. "Just catching up." "The crash. Investigation is taking up a lot of time." Grant walked to the window, hands in his pockets, gazing out at the city lights. "I heard about your visit to the valley. To see the man who pulled you out. I wanted to thank him in person," Vivian said carefully. "Seemed like the right thing to do." "Of course," Grant said smoothly, "but you should be careful. People talk. They're already making this more complicated than it needs to be." Vivian's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice neutral. "He didn't do anything wrong. He saved my life." Grant turned from the window. "I'm sure he did. But perception matters. You know that better than anyone." He stepped toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. His voice was casual, almost offhand. "You're not digging into old personnel files, are you?" The question hung in the air. Casual, but pointed. Vivian's heart thudded in her chest, but her face remained perfectly neutral. "Why would I do that?" Grant smiled again. "No reason. Just don't want you wasting time on ghosts when we have real problems to deal with." He left. The door clicked shut behind him. Vivian waited until his footsteps faded completely. Then she opened the file again, printed everything, and slipped the pages into her bag. She walked out of the building into the rain, her mind racing. The man who had saved her had been destroyed by her family, and now she had to decide what to do with that truth. The call came at 9:43 in the evening. Ethan's phone, an old flip model he kept charged more out of habit than necessity, buzzed on the kitchen counter. Something made him pick it up. "Mr. Cole." The voice was calm, professional. "This is Vivian Hale." Ethan's grip tightened. "How'd you get this number?" "I have resources. I need to see you tonight. It's important." "I don't think that's a good idea. The press is already your son." Vivian's voice cut through his words. "Noah, he has asthma, doesn't he?" Ethan's blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" From Noah's room came a crash, followed by a choked, gasping sound. Ethan dropped the phone and ran. Noah was sitting up in bed, clutching his chest, his face pale and slick with sweat. His mouth was open, struggling for air, each breath a shallow, desperate wheeze. Ethan grabbed the inhaler from the nightstand, shook it, pressed it to Noah's lips. Nothing. Empty. He tore through the bathroom cabinet. The backup inhaler wasn't there. It wasn't anywhere. Noah's breaths came in short, desperate gasps. His lips were turning blue. Panic clawed at Ethan's throat. He scooped Noah up and ran for the front door. But before he reached it, headlights flooded the driveway. A black Cadillac skidded to a stop. Vivian jumped out. "Get in." Now. Ethan didn't hesitate. He climbed into the back seat, cradling Noah. Against his chest, Vivian slid behind the wheel and gunned the engine. The car roared down the dirt road, headlights cutting through the darkness. Noah's breathing was growing shallower by the second. Ethan held him tighter, his voice breaking. "Stay with me, buddy. Stay with me." The drive should have taken 40 minutes. Vivian made it in 25. The emergency room doors flew open. Nurses rushed forward with a gurney. Ethan set Noah down, his hands shaking. A doctor in blue scrubs took over, hooking Noah to a nebulizer. The boy's chest began to rise and fall more steadily. Ethan sank into a plastic chair in the hallway, his head in his hands. Vivian stood a few feet away, soaked from the rain. She didn't say anything, she just stayed. An hour passed. Finally, the doctor emerged. "He's stable. We'll keep him overnight, but he's going to be fine." Ethan exhaled, a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. He walked into the room and sat beside his son's bed. Noah's eyes were half closed, the oxygen mask fogging with each breath. "Dad, I'm here. I'm right here." Vivian appeared in the doorway. Ethan looked at her, his eyes red. "Thank you. Without you, I couldn't have." She stepped closer. "You're not alone in this. Not anymore." Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. He held it out to her. "Everything I kept, the warnings, the emails, the proof of what happened 6 years ago, it's all here." Vivian took it, her fingers closing around the cold metal. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because you're the only one who can do something with it." She nodded slowly. "Then I will. I promise." The conference room was small and anonymous, tucked into a law office on the edge of downtown Seattle. Vivian sat at one end of the long table, Ethan at the other. Between them, an independent forensic engineer named Dr. Laura Simmons connected the USB drive to her laptop. The projector hummed to life. The screen lit up. Files opened one by one. Emails with subject lines like urgent, hydraulic system review needed, and safety concerns, no response. Scanned pages of handwritten notes, technical drawings with annotations, in red ink. Photos of cracked metal components. Test data showing failure rates far above acceptable thresholds. Dr. Simmons scrolled through it all in silence, her expression darkening. With each new document, she opened an email from Ethan to his supervisor. Hydraulic control. System shows catastrophic failure under sustained load. Recommend immediate grounding of all units pending redesign. The response, 3 days later, was a single line. Your concerns are noted. Continue with scheduled production. Dr. Simmons clicked to another file. A memo from the engineering director to the executive team. Minor technical issue flagged by junior engineer. Cost of recall estimated at $2.3 billion. Recommend internal review only. She leaned back in her chair. Finally, she looked up. This is damning. Whoever signed off on these systems knew they were. Unstably, people could die. Vivian's voice was quiet. Who signed off? Dr. Simmons clicked open a scanned approval form. At the bottom, A, signature in blue ink. Grant Hale. The room went still. Ethan leaned back, his face unreadable. Dr. Simmons spoke again. He approved it to avoid a recall. A recall would have cost billions, so he buried the reports and pushed the aircraft into production anyway. She glanced at Ethan. He made sure the blame went elsewhere. Blamed the pilot, and when that wasn't enough, he made sure the person who'd warned them couldn't warn anyone else. Ethan's voice was flat. They fired me the day after the explosion, told me if I talked to anyone, they'd sue me and make sure I never worked again. Vivian stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Rain streaked the glass. If I go public with this, she said slowly, it'll destroy the company. Thousands of people will lose their jobs. My family's name will be ruined. Ethan's voice cut through. And if you don't, more people will die. She turned to face him. His eyes were steady. Not accusing, just honest. Vivian nodded. Then I know what I have to do. The emergency board meeting was called for 8 o'clock on a Thursday morning. The conference room on the 40th floor was already full when Vivian arrived. Executives in tailored suits sat around the long table, tablets open, coffee cups steaming. Lawyers with briefcases lined the walls. Grant Hale sat at the head of the table, his expression calm, his fingers steepled. The morning sun streamed through the windows. Vivian entered last, carrying a slim leather folder and a tablet. She didn't sit. Every eye in the room turned to her. Grant smiled. Vivian. The media situation and finalize our response strategy. I agree, Vivian said. She walked to the front of the room and connected her tablet to the wall-mounted screen. The display flickered to life. An email appeared. The date was clear. 6 years and 4 months ago. The subject line, read, hydraulic failure risk. Immediate action required. The sender was Ethan Cole. The room shifted. Murmurs rippled through the executives. Grant's smile faded. Vivian clicked to the next slide. A photo of a cracked hydraulic component. Then another email. This one from Grant himself. Bury this. We're not recalling 50 aircraft over a minor flaw. Production continues as scheduled. She let the words hang in the air. One of the board members stood abruptly. This is if these documents are authentic. They're real, Vivian said. She clicked again. A scanned approval form. Grant's signature at the bottom. The incident report from the Nevada test flight. 1 civilian, fatality. Rebecca Cole. Another board member stood, his face pale. He closed his folder and walked out. Then another followed. Within 2 minutes, half the room was empty. Grant slammed his hand on the table. You're going to destroy this company. Everything we've built. Everything your father worked for. Vivian turned to face him. No, Uncle Grant. You already did that when you chose money over lives. She set the leather folder on the table in front of him. I'm stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. I've contacted the FAA. They'll be opening a full investigation. You'll be hearing from them very soon. Grant's face went red. You think you're a hero? You think this makes you better than me? No, Vivian said quietly. I'm choosing the right side. Finally, she walked toward the door. Behind her, the room erupted. Outside the building, reporters waited on the plaza. Vivian pushed through the glass doors into the daylight. Cameras flashed. Microphones thrust forward. Miss Hale, is it true you're accusing your own uncle of sabotage? Vivian stopped at the top of the steps. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. The evidence speaks for itself. I will cooperate fully with any investigation into Hale dynamic safety practices, past and present. A reporter pushed forward. What about Grant Hale? That's for the authorities to determine. I've provided them with everything they need. She turned and walked to her car. Inside, her hands shook, but she started the engine and drove away. At his cabin, Ethan sat on the porch with his laptop. Headlines scrolled across the screen. CEO exposes family cover-up in deadly plane crash scandal. He closed the laptop. He looked out at the lake. The sky was clearing, sunlight breaking through the clouds for the first time in days. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe. More headlines followed in the days that came. Grant Hale indicted on 12 counts of corporate negligence. Hale Dynamics announces independent ethics board. Families of crash victims praise company's transparency. Whistleblower vindicated after 6 years of silence. Noah sat beside Ethan on the porch, scrolling through the headlines on an old tablet. Dad, does this mean people know you were right? Ethan looked at his son. It means the truth finally came out. Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Mom would be proud of you." Ethan's throat tightened. He pulled his son close. "She'd be proud of both of us, Bud." 2 days later, Vivian returned to the valley. This time, she came alone. No assistants, no Cadillacs, just a rental car and a bag of groceries. She parked beside Ethan's truck and knocked on the door. Noah opened it, his face lighting up. "You came back." Vivian smiled. "I promised, didn't I?" Ethan appeared behind his son, surprised. "Didn't think you'd come." "I'm not here as a CEO," Vivian said. "I'm here as someone who owes you, more than I can ever repay." She held up the bag. "I brought dinner, if that's okay." Ethan stepped aside. "Come in." They ate at the small kitchen table. Spaghetti with marinara, garlic, bread, a simple salad. Nothing fancy, just food shared between people who had been through something together. Noah talked about his model airplanes, showing Vivian his latest project. She listened, asked questions, seemed genuinely interested. After Noah went to bed, Ethan and Vivian sat on the porch with cups of coffee in their hands. The stars were out, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "I lost my faith in people a long time ago," Ethan said. "After Rebecca died. After they fired me, I stopped believing that doing the right thing mattered." Vivian looked at him. "And now? Now I think maybe it does. Because of what you did. You risked everything. Your career, your family, your name." Vivian shook her head. "I didn't do anything you wouldn't have done." "You did more," Ethan said. "You listened. You believed me. You chose truth over comfort." Vivian stood to leave. At the door, she turned. "There's a position opening, head of safety and compliance. It's not glamorous, but it's important. And I can't think of anyone better." Ethan hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready for that world again." "You don't have to decide now. Just think about it." She walked to her car. Before she drove away, Ethan called after her. "Vivian." She stopped. "You gave my wife justice. Thank you." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. She nodded and drove off into the night. Ethan stood on the porch for a long time. For the first time in 6 years, the weight on his chest felt lighter. 1 year later, the grand opening of the Hale Safety Foundation took place at the newly renovated headquarters. The building was smaller than the old tower, built with reclaimed wood and floor-to-ceiling windows, designed to let in light. Inside, a crowd gathered. Engineers and safety advocates, families of crash victims, whistleblowers who had been silenced, students studying aerospace engineering, journalists with cameras. Vivian stood at the podium, dressed in a sharp blazer, her hair down. "A year ago, I almost died. Not because of bad luck or an act of God, but because people in positions of power chose profit over safety. Chose silence over truth." She paused. "One man chose differently. 6 years ago, Ethan Cole warned my company about a critical flaw that would cost lives. He did everything right, and for that, he was punished. He lost his job. He lost his wife in the dark. Very accident he tried to prevent." Her eyes found Ethan in the front row. He sat beside Noah, who was dressed in a button-down shirt, looking more grown up than ever. This foundation exists because of people like him, people who refuse to stay quiet when they see something wrong, who believe that doing the right thing matters, even when it costs them everything. The room erupted in applause. People stood. That afternoon, they returned to Clearwater Valley. Ethan launched the old wooden boat. Noah carried a model airplane he had been working on for months, sleek and silver with perfect lines. He set it carefully on the water's surface. For a moment, it just floated. Then the wind caught it, and it began to glide forward, smooth and sure. Vivian stood at the shore, her hands in her pockets. "You know, I used to think power was about control, about being the one, in charge. And now, Ethan asked, now I think it's about letting go, about trusting other people to do what's right. Noah ran back from the water's edge, his shoes wet, his face flushed with happiness. Ethan pulled him close. The three of them stood at the edge of the lake as the sun began to set. The light turned golden, then amber, reflecting off the water in shimmering waves. Vivian spoke quietly. Sometimes the most valuable thing isn't saving someone's life. It's being forgiven. Ethan looked at her. You didn't need forgiveness. You needed courage, and you found it. She smiled. The past wasn't erased. The pain wasn't gone. But the future felt possible. Noah looked up at the darkening sky, then at his father, then at Vivian. Do you think Mom can see us from up there? Ethan looked out at the lake, shimmering in the fading light. The place where he had saved a stranger. The place where his life had changed for the second time. Yeah, Bud, I think she can. The light on the water looked like hope.